Good morning, boys and girls. This is Mrs. Kernu. I just want to go over some of your vocabulary that you're going to need for our next science unit. So, we're going to learn ecosystems, interactions, energy, and dynamics. So, we're going to look at how living things and non living things work together in an ecosystem. So, what we're going to do is describe the movement of matter among plants, animals, decomposers, and the environment. So, let's get started with learning our vocabulary so that we know how to talk about what we're learning. Now, these may look familiar because we've used these cards in the past. Unfortunately, because of our new school situation, I can't really give these to you, but I am going to go through them. I did attach a PDF in case you have a printer at home. If you don't have a printer and you still want to study them, you can make your own cards on paper. Just an idea to help you, but you will need to know these words. All right, let's get started. So the first thing that you need to know is the difference between a biotic factor and an abiotic factor. A biotic factor is a living thing in an ecosystem, such as a plant, an animal, or a bacterium. You can see the illustration there. We have we've got a nice little tiger, we've got a tree, we've got some bacteria. So biotic factors are alive. Abiotic factors are non-living parts of the ecosystem. So things like temperature, the sun, rain, rocks, those are abiotic factors. They're non-living parts of the ecosystem. So those are the differences between biotic and abiotic factors. Okay, a niche is the role of an organism in an ecosystem. So what does it do in the ecosystem? Food chain is the path that energy and nutrients follow in an ecosystem. So here you got your plant, you got grass, you got a grasshopper, you got that nice little creature that eats the grasshopper, and then somebody in that creature. So food chain is the path that energy and nutrients follow. Next up, we have producers, consumers, and decomposers. So a producer is an organism, such as a plant, that makes its own food. And we know that plants make their own food through the process of photosynthesis. Consumers are organisms that eat plants and other animals. So you and I are consumers, because when you eat that delicious pork chop for dinner, you have eaten an animal, and those green beans on the side, you've eaten a plant. So a consumer eats plants and other animals. A decomposer is an organism that breaks down dead plant and animal material. So things like bacteria and fungi. Food web is the overlapping food chains in an ecosystem. So we've talked about a food chain where there's an energy flow from one thing to another. This is different from a food web, because a food web is when you put all those chains together in the ecosystem, there are going to be things that overlap. Okay? So there are many creatures that are eating the plants. There are many creatures that are eating those animals that are eating the plants, and it just goes all over the place. So food web is a little more complicated, but it's just because it involves more overlapping. Okay. There's also the thing called a limiting factor. That's anything that controls the growth or survival of a population. So if there is, let's say, people building their homes in a habitat, that would be a limiting factor. Let's say that people are trying to build a home and a tornado comes through. That would be a limiting factor. All right, so let's talk about some of these relationships in the ecosystem. Symbiosis is a relationship between two kinds of organisms over time. That means that they work together to survive. There's a relationship between them. Now, there's different kinds of relationships. So the first relationship is that we're going to talk about is mutualism, a relationship between two kinds of organisms that benefits both organisms. So you have this nice little illustration of the honeybee. So mutualism means that both organisms are getting something out of the relationship. Now, this word's fun to say, so I'm going to try my best. Commensalism. Just kidding. That was so wrong. Commensalism. Yeah, I tried. Okay. You guys know I have my Philly accent. A relationship between two kinds of organisms that benefits one without harming the other. So that means that there's two organisms in the relationship, but only one is really getting a benefit and the other one's not being harmed in the process. All right, next word, parasitism. And that's my dog playing with a cardboard box because he thinks he's a puppy. All right, so parasitism is a relationship in which one organism lives in or on another organism and benefits from that organism while the host organism is harmed by it. So we've had conversations before about how Ms. Kernu hates camping, and I've told you stories about ticks. So ticks are a type of organism that will attach itself to your skin and will harm you. But meanwhile, they're living their best life. So a tick is an example of one of those organisms that definitely is benefiting from a parasitism relationship with people or animals. So again, this is a relationship in which one organism lives in or on another organism and benefits from that relationship while the host organism is harmed by it. Like I said, if you have a tick, can get disease from it. So parasitism is not exactly the best relationship for all organisms involved. All right, let's move on. Let's move on from relationships now. So we have something called an invasive species, a specific classification of a plant or an animal that is not native to an ecosystem. So if you guys remembered, we were waiting outside the one day and we saw spotted lanternflies and we had to kill them because they are an invasive species. They are not native to our ecosystem and they can hurt our plants and animals if they are able to reproduce and take over. So an invasive species is a negative thing because it can have negative effects. All right, let's talk about the water cycle. The water cycle is the continuous movement of water between Earth's surface and the air, and it changes from liquid into gas into liquid. And the water cycle is something you've probably learned about in the past. And water vapor is water in the form of a gas that is present during evaporation. Another thing that you've learned about. All right, let's talk about a different cycle. We have the oxygen carbon dioxide cycle, which is something that benefits you very much. It's the continuous exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen among living things. So we always talk about we need more trees, we need more plants because of the fact that they release oxygen. We use that oxygen, we release carbon dioxide. They like our carbon dioxide. So it works out for us very well in our ecosystem. All right, the last word that we're going to talk about that we need to know for this chapter is nitrogen cycle, the continuous trapping of nitrogen gas into compounds in the soil and its return to the air. We'll learn more about that as we go as well. So boys and girls, you're going to use these words as power words. Now, when we come across them and what we're reading or what we're listening to in our videos, we're going to need to be able to use these words, understand these words. So please make sure that you study these words. I want you to be able to use these words in your conversation and understand them. So please, whether you have to write them down, print them out, make sure you study them. Make sure you know the difference between a producer, a consumer, and a decomposer. Make sure you understand what the different cycles are and the different relationships are so that you can do really well on this unit of science. Again, thank you for listening, and I will see you for our next lesson soon enough. Bye, guys.